It was good, y'all. It's your boy JD6 here. I'm with my man. Shout out to KC Sports Authority. Make sure y'all go check that podcast out, man.
You heard the man. And welcome into another episode of the KC Sports Authority podcast. I'm Keegan Russell. He is Spencer Gray. And if you guys can do us just a quick favor, if you're watching over on YouTube, just hit that subscribe button right there on the screen. If you can, we would greatly appreciate it. And if you're listening to us over on Spotify, be sure to take a moment to give us a 5-star review and share your thoughts about the podcast with us. We'd love to hear that. And of course, if you want to follow us on social media, you got Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search at KCSA Pod. In today's episode, Spencer and I want to talk a little KU basketball. It's 2 weeks into the season, and the Jayhawks are off to a pretty decent start. You know, we got a rough matchup with Marquette that we'll probably talk a little bit about here, but want to just kind of get some thoughts on the team so far early on here, as well as preview the Uconn matchup that's coming up here Friday night. Big time top 25 matchup, top 5 matchup at home in Allen Fieldhouse. So let's just kind of get into it. Spencer, it's been a pretty decent season to start other than that Marquette game. A lot of ways we can go early on. Of course, we want to talk about Hunter Dickinson and his impact, that double-double machine he is, the 20-10 guy. Talk about Kevin McCullar's jump and rise this year. Talk about some of those freshmen and incoming guys. But just kind of take me through the first 2 weeks. What are some of your impressions of this team so far?
It's going to be, and I feel like this is every year with KU, it's going to be ones that we finish the year strong. You look back on the year, you look at our record, you look at how we finished in the postseason, you're going to say, man, that was a great season. And then you think back to watching each individual game, you're going to say, man, this is kind of a roller coaster. So if you ask KU Twitter, we are winless as of right now. We haven't won a single game. But overall, I think there's a lot to be excited about this season. Obviously, like you said, Hunter Dickinson has been everything that he was advertised. McCullar's taken a huge jump. You know, Dewan and KJ are playing the way they play. And a lot of the newcomers are, you know, we're seeing flashes of their potential, which I think is going to be realized later in the season. But overall, I think this is a pretty good start outside of a, you know, rough game against a good team in Marquette.
Yeah, that a whole trip to Hawaii, I think, was very taxing in general. I think we saw that in the Eastern Illinois game with how sluggish we were. Bill Self talked about it a couple times this week that they just looked a little tired, but they've played some good competition early on. They've had some quality matchups. I mean, Marquette, Self said it after that game, Marquette might be the best team they face all year outside of the NCAA tournament, and they might be the best team in general, even in the tournament that they play. I hate Shaka Smart, hate playing against him, but they're always well coached whenever a team of his is up against us, and they definitely were the better team that night. But then you bounce back with Tennessee the next night in another really intense matchup. You know, Tennessee's had our number the last couple of years, but I've been impressed with the addition of Hunter Dickinson. I mean, they are super intentional about getting him the ball and getting him the ball early and often. You know, the guy's already averaging 21.7 a game. 12.7 rebounds a game, a walking double-double. He's been incredibly dominant. KU's been very good at finding open looks for him. He's also been great at, you know, just finding positioning down low. So I've definitely been impressed with that addition, and I think the sky's the limit for him. He's probably going to have one of the best statistical offensive seasons we'll see out of a KU player. But let's talk about Kevin McCullar. A guy who last year, you know, there were a couple of games we won because of his effort, but he wasn't a guy you needed to go do a whole lot. And then this year, you don't have Jalen Wilson, you don't have Grady Dick looking to get buckets, and you don't have the different lineup of KJ playing the 5. But Kevin McCullar, man, he's come out on fire. 2 triple-doubles, back-to-back games. First off, that's never been done in KU basketball history to have back-to-back triple-doubles. He's now the leader in KU basketball history with triple-doubles, sitting there at 2. Now, we have to go back to that Jeff Withey game in March Madness where he had a triple-double. So it's been a while. It's not something you see that often in college basketball to begin with. But take me through this leap Kevin McCullar has had, going from, you know, 10 points a game, 6 rebounds, to the guy's now averaging 18 a game, and looks just completely different this year.
Well, I think it's two main things. Number one is just opportunity. I think he's a lot more of the focal point in the offense. Obviously, Hunter Dickinson's going to be the guy you run through most of the offensive possessions through. But, Kevin's really the guy that if you need a one-on-one bucket, you're going to give it to him at that point. So opportunity is just going to get more shots, so that's going to be expected. But then I think he really tightened up the mechanics on the jump shot, less of a hitch. It's less of a strenuous shot with his arms. He's adding some lower body into that too. It's more of a fluid motion and release. So that's going to open up his opportunities too. Now, all of a sudden, teams aren't backing off of him as much, and they're definitely not going to keep shooting the way he does, which is going to, give him a little bit more space to actually drive and get to the basket. And the thing I'll say is his jump was needed. We needed a guy that can get us a bucket. Obviously we can dumb it down to Hunter, and Hunter can get us a bucket. We saw, he's a double machine like we talked about, but, close game and clock's going down. A lot of times you dump it to the post, you're just going to collapse right in on it. And we're not shooting particularly great from three already. So, you're not going to rely on the open shooters. So we need a guy that can go one-on-one and get to the basket, get to a mid-range, get to his spots and get us a basket. And he's going to be that guy. And the cool thing is that think about how many versatile offensive players we've had play for the KU program. And he has the most triple doubles. I mean, that's just incredible.
Insane. Yeah.
It's insane. And he's doing all of this while being elite defensively. So, I mean, I think he's throwing his hat in there for National Play of the Year conversation. And I think it's going to be a foot race between him and his teammate, which is pretty cool that we have both of those guys on the team. But yeah, Kevin's been fantastic at the start of the year.
I don't know who I was talking with last week, but I had that same comment with them. I was like, how crazy is it that KU basketball has two guys that you could legitimately argue have been the best player in college basketball so far? Because Kevin's definitely given his case. Two triple doubles. He's averaging 18 a game, 7 rebounds a game, 5.7 assists, which is also a jump up from last year. Now he's not shooting great from three as of late, 29%, but we didn't really expect him to do anything. We talked about preseason that if Kevin can shoot somewhere between 30 and 33%, we'll be pretty happy with that. But I think the big jump is what you said there offensively. We talked about coming into this year, outside of Hunter Dickinson, the question was, where does the offense come from? Who's going to be the guy to go get you a bucket when everything's falling apart? Hunter's in foul trouble, Hunter's struggling, whatever the case may be. And Kevin's shown that, he can kind of have that J. Will type possession where if we just need to go find a bucket, he's going to find a way to create some offense with DeJuan Harris and go get hit. So I'm very, very impressed with him. I think that's a pretty lethal duo. And of course, if McCullar can continue the improvement on his jump shot that we've seen in spurts, then that kind of makes him a very, very well-rounded individual. As with this starting unit as a whole, we came into the season, questions at the two, pretty much the expectation I think all of us had, you, me, and JB, was that Elmarko would probably get the nod early. And then depending on how he was playing, we might see a couple other rotations there. But just talk to me about the starting lineup. Is it the starting lineup that you think we'll see the most often this season? And then we'll kind of roll into our thoughts on Elmarko and Johnny Furphy and Nick Timberlake to kind of round out that group. But what do you think so far of this starting group?
I think the starting group is working. It's functioning well. Defensively, I think, again, we're showing up as one of the premier defensive teams in the league. A lot of versatility offensively between playing down low and spreading the floor and DeJuan running the point. Obviously, I don't know if it's going to be the one that we see the most, because I really think there's going to be some tweaking here throughout the season. You might even see a change towards the end of the season, even in the tournament. I think Self can make a change if he thinks that's one catching a hot streak here. So, obviously Jackson's been a little bit inconsistent. There's been flashes. He's had games where he's passed the ball really well, defended really well. He had 3 steals last game. So, he's definitely, I think, been a little inconsistent and a little timid to start with, which I think is pretty expected with these freshman players. So I can't say if it's going to be the one that we see the most, but I think overall it's done its job so far.
Yeah, I think they've done what we anticipated. I think the hope was a guy like Elmarko would be a little bit further along offensively. I think some of that's just, it's not really within the nature of this offense right now that he's needed. He hasn't been terrible offensively, but he's turned the ball over a little bit, made some poor decisions. Pretty common for a freshman. Bill Self has said it the last couple of weeks during some press conferences that all in all, those young guys are playing as he expects, but you can clearly see that they're young. Him and Furphy, and even Jamari McDougal to an extent, just some inconsistencies on the floor in some of their spacing. But I guess the question I have with the 2 spot, and I guess the team as a whole, we've talked about how 3-point shooting was going to be a big key coming into this year. And overall, it's not nothing terrible, but they haven't shot the ball, anything super exciting. They're shooting about 35% from the 3, which isn't bad, but isn't super, super great. Let's talk about that addition of Nick Timberlake. Timberlake was supposed to be the guy that come in to be the knockdown shooter, put up big time shots. We were kind of thinking he'd be the starter and at least get the most looks. But so far he's not been shooting the ball well. He's shooting less than 30% from 3, not even 70% from the free throw line. And he's only shooting 35% from the floor as a whole. I don't want to speak necessarily badly on him, but I would say to this point, he's probably been the biggest disappointment. I don't know. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it's a fair statement. And I think a shooter is the most susceptible to that kind of result. I think when you're going to have disappointments, shooting is the most hot and cold thing in basketball. So you get a guy that's known as a pure shooter. I don't want to say it's expected, but when it happens, you're not necessarily surprised. I think the thing with Nick Timberlake is a couple things. Number one, it's rhythm. So when you're a shooter, a lot of what you go on is the rhythm of the offense, the flow of the offense. So when you're getting inconsistent minutes, and we're probably going to see that when Self tweaks the lineup and makes changes, that can affect your shooting. So I think, again, I'm not really surprised that he got off to a slow start this season. I think he's going to come alive a little bit more towards the middle. And I really hope he does, because he is, without a doubt, I would say the only pure shooter on this team. Honestly, I mean, Hunter's looking pretty solid for 3-point, already, which, he's a jack of all trades. But not surprised on Timberlake, but I do think it's a fair statement to say he's been a little disappointing.
And in defense of Timberlake, he really hasn't gotten a lot of playing time. He's averaging like 13 minutes a game, if that.
Mm-hmm.
He had 11 minutes last night in a very rough game that we could have used some shooting and still didn't get a lot of look. That Tennessee game, that was a large, grinded out game, only played 3 minutes. Marquette game only played 12 minutes, went 1 for 5. It's hard to get in a rhythm when you're not really out there. And I think, Self even says it too. If you're not doing the other things, you're not going to get much playing time. If you can't play defense, if you can't, rebound well, guard your man. So I think some of it's just opportunity. He hasn't had a lot of it. So when he's out there, I think there's a little bit more pressure on him to find open looks. And I think in general, KU just hasn't done an effective job of finding shots for him within the rhythm of the offense. I think there's been a lot of forced shots. He seems to be a guy that isn't afraid to let it loose if a guy's, not necessarily draped all over him, but he doesn't look for a lot of space to get a shot up. He's willing to take a shot there. Let's talk about another addition, though, in Johnny Furphy, because Furphy's probably one of the reasons Timberlake wasn't getting a lot of minutes for a couple of games there, because Furphy, after his first game or two, Furphy actually looked pretty decent. But what's your take on him so far? What do you like? What do you still have questions on? Just overall impressions of his game so far.
Well, I think there's a lot to be excited about. He's, I'd say he's a little bit of a raw prospect at this point. You see some simple mistakes, some mental mistakes, which again, you're not only going to see with freshmen, but you're going to see with guys when they're as young as he is. You know what I mean? So overall, though, I think you see flashes of his potential. Very athletic, very long. You see the defensive potential. Playing passing lanes, long arms, good hands. And then he's got a good shooting form there. So, I think he's going to develop into a really, really good player. It just depends on when. It could be the end of the season, or he could not hit his stride maybe till his, second year as a sophomore. So I like what I've seen from him. I would not be surprised if we see his minutes grow in the rotation a little bit. But, I think that's going to come down to how much Self wants to experiment and run different lineups out there. But I'd be excited if I was, for most KU fans, you should be excited for Furphy.
Yeah, Furphy's getting about 15 minutes a game here and there. I think the biggest thing you see his potential for sure. His athleticism is off the charts. I think that long wingspan is a great long wing defender to use on the perimeter there. I think his feet are a little slow when it comes to defense, and I think that's to be expected because now he's up a big major level from where he's used to playing, and he's also super young. I think we forget that this kid's barely 18. coming over here from Australia, jumping in competition immediately, missing most of summer ball to where he didn't get in and get all the practice going. So I think he's coming along, but he's a lot of fun to watch. Love seeing athleticism. It's easy for him to go get his shot up. I think as he just gets more comfortable in the rhythm of this offense, he's going to continue to grow, just like with El Marco and even Timberlake to a degree. And then the other new guy that we kind of talked about potential of him redshirting, and turns out he might be a very critical piece of this team, and that's Jamari McDougal. Didn't start the year because of injury, but he's gotten quite a bit of run time lately. He's gotten quite a few minutes. He's been impressive to me defensively. I think he just brings a little bit of a tenacity out there that you just don't get out of freshmen typically. But I think we're almost at the point where you have to find minutes for him in this team rotation here, because he's, even if he's not doing anything offensively to provide scoring, this is a guy that's making an impact on the game. What have you seen from him so far that you like?
Well, I like the energy he brings in, especially in that Marquette game where we were going through those just absolutely awful slumps. You saw Jamari come in there, hit a three. He's very active defensively. I think he plays with a lot more poise than I think we're used to freshmen playing with. And I know that's really high on Self's, wish list there when it comes to new and young players. So I agree. I think you do have to find minutes for him. And I think he's going to be one of those hidden gems that we get, every single season. And especially if you see some of the other guys start to struggle, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts to slide up the rotation a little bit.
Yeah. He's definitely the furthest along of El Marco and Furphy defensively. I mean, that Tennessee game, he played 27 minutes, played a majority of the game. Nothing else was working. Scored 7 points, got a couple shots, actually took 6 3-pointers in that game, surprisingly. But got a couple shots off. He found a way to be involved in that game. And I think it gave a lot of hope for Self, because he might be a guy that's not necessarily in the closing lineup all the time, but might be a guy when you need some energy and you need some intensity out there, that he finds himself taking minutes away from a guy like Furphy or El Marco. Because even when KU goes small and they play KJ at the 5, if McCullar or if Dickinson's out, now you can slide McDowell in there as a wing defender and still feel pretty good with the lineup you have, even despite maybe his offensive skill set. So I've been pleased there. Another guy, Parker Brown, hasn't had to play a lot of huge minutes yet, but I've liked what I've seen with him. He's clearly athletic for a guy with his frame. I don't think fans really understood how athletic he was, because we just think Christian Brown is the most athletic of the two, but a couple more inches on that body, and Parker is still very capable of flying up and down the court and doing some good things. Not getting a whole lot of minutes, about 11 minutes, which is kind of what we expected, but it's looked pretty decent. Any thoughts you have on him so far?
No, I think he's doing exactly what we need him to do. He's running the floor. He's playing really hard on defense, getting boards. I think he's incredibly active on both sides of the floor. And like you said, if we're getting 10, 11, 12 good minutes out of him, I think that's all you can ask. So I've been very happy with Parker so far.
Yeah. I think he's a good addition, good solid backup spot minutes. We've actually seen a few moments where it's been him and Hunter out there on the floor with some nice spacing, which was always the question. How would spacing look? But I think he fits in role-wise fairly well. And then there's KJ Adams, a guy who's talk about a rough start to the year off the court with the loss of his mother. And just I was very shocked, surprised, and impressed to see how he played in Hawaii coming off of that. Everybody loves him. Everybody is thinking about him and praying for him and his family. And he just came out and played basketball, does what he does. And I think I said this on one of our episodes. To me, he's going to be one of our X factors all year. I think he's a guy that when nothing's working, you can just run the pick and roll with KJ and let that athleticism work. Bill Self clearly has his new favorite out of bounds play from underneath the goal. It has been unstoppable. And I remember years back when he would do that with Ben McLemore and Andrew Wiggins, how effective that was. And now KJ's, another perfect guy for it. He's just got so much hop in his game, a lot of leap, strength, physicality. Could improve rebounding because he hasn't been a great rebounder this year. But I've liked what I've seen there with KJ. DeJuan, of course, isn't really scoring the ball, but he does what DeJuan does. He's averaging 7 assists this year. He's averaging a little bit. He's a little high on turnovers. I think this team as a whole has been really, really turnover prone. So hopefully that kind of settles down. But early on, 2 weeks in, I think this is about where we expected. I did not have us coming out undefeated. I figured we would drop one of those games in Hawaii. I kind of thought it would be Tennessee just because of how tough they play. But Marquette, wow, they were fantastic. They looked like they were the better team from start to finish, and that was proven with how the game went. But I think that did also give me some good insight just in college basketball as a whole. I mean, we've played Kentucky, great matchup. Kentucky outplayed us for the majority of that game. We found a way to grind it out. Marquette, very, very good team. Tennessee, another top 10 team. We've got Uconn coming up here, another top 10 team. KU is no short of quality competition to start the season, and we're not even to Big 12 play yet, which has other very top high-end teams. I'm a big fan of the way the schedule works. I think it gives us some more exciting games early on as long as you sprinkle in some of these semi-cupcake games just to kind of give them a break here and there. But I think it's been a good start to the year. I definitely have my questions, but what are some of your either biggest disappointments or the question marks you still have that have you worried about how far this team can really go?
Oh, well, really my concerns, I think we're great defensively, and I think we can defend any team in the country. My concerns really come on the offensive end. The turnovers, particularly, I'll bring it up again in the Marquette game because that was just a brutal game. The turnovers were just killers every single time. They were unforced errors. They were mental errors. It felt like we were playing too fast almost, which is really, interesting because DeJuan's always been incredible with controlling the tempo of the game, playing within the speed that we want to go. Like you said, he's been struggling with turnovers himself. So that's honestly my big concern right now is taking care of the basketball because we can even have a hot shooting night if we give the ball up 20 times and we give up, 20 points in transition. We're going to have a tough time, coming back and winning that game. And then my other concern, and this has been the concern at the beginning of the year, and it probably will be throughout the season, is perimeter shooting. It's going to be what holds us back because one of the strategies that I've seen be pretty successful in us is don't let Hunter get deep into the paint. Hunter's catching it 10, 12, 15 feet away from the basket. And yeah, he can face up and he can take a couple dribbles in, but that's not his primary offensive threat. So you take that out of the equation. We need shooting from the perimeter and we need, an outside scoring threat because otherwise people are going to just pack in the paint and prevent Hunter and KJ from getting to their spots. So, I don't know whether it's going to be Timberlake figuring it out, Furphy, figuring it out and developing throughout the season, or Kevin improving his shooting. Like I said, his form has improved, at least from what I've seen, but we're not really seeing it translate into percentages. So, it's too bad because obviously when it comes to March, turnovers and shooting are the things that win and lose you the entire game. So it's going to be something that we have a long time to figure out, but I definitely want to see us tighten up the game and play a little bit more organized. And, nobody's got to beat Grady Dick. Nobody's got to beat Ben McLemore or Brandon Green or anything like that. You don't have to shoot 45% on 8 attempts a game, but you got to at least hit the open ones. And that's all we're really asking for. And the last thing I'll say is, we saw DeJuan score career high in points, and I thought that was fantastic because, again, when he drives with the notion of, I'm going to either score it or pass it, he doesn't have tunnel vision. And I know he put on his Instagram story or post whatever, I shoot it when we need it or whatever.
Yeah.
We need you to shoot more. We need it. So please do not be afraid. He had 1 point last game. He had 9 assists, so obviously he did his stuff. But I'd love to see DeJuan be aggressive on the offensive end because I think when he is, I think we hit kind of a new level offensively.
Yeah, I think you saw that Kentucky matchup for sure. When he's aggressive and assertive, it just changes the whole way the other team has to play because now they have to account for not just giving him open looks. Like he's going to find open looks, but you have to account for when he's driving that now he's also looking to score, which will then help him in his passing game too because now guys are giving him attention.
Right.
But yeah, even in the games that he's not, giving you more than 4 or 5 points, he's clearly having a big impact as long as it's in the form of 8 to 10 assists, 2 to 3 steals, and he's not turning the ball over. But yeah, I think 3-point shooting is going to continue to be a question all season. I think it's going to be the consistency of it. I'm sure we'll have games where we'll go 3 of 17, 3 of 22, and then we're going to have games where we go 9 of 15, 9 of 14, 9 of 13, something like that, and it's going to be a big impact. We clearly saw, though, on the other side, a team like Eastern Illinois who hung around all night because of how effective they were shooting the three. I know the perimeter defense, Self said defense has been okay, but he said perimeter defense has been a struggle, and he attributed a lot of that to the young guys on the team that just aren't up to speed with the college speed yet of closing out, shuffling their feet, and knowing how to get your guy further out from the 3-point line before they catch it, instead of letting them catch it closer. I think, but my biggest question so far was another question we had last year, and that is the production from the bench. This year, I think, is different than last year. Last year, you needed the bench to provide something because you didn't have enough offensive firepower with the way the team was constructed. You needed the bench. If the bench didn't show up, there was a game you struggled in. This year, I don't think you need the bench to score a ton, but you need those guys to come in the rhythm of the offense and provide a positive impact. So I think I'm looking for, Furphy, McDowell, Parker Brown, whoever, Nick Timberlake, to get some rhythm in the offense when they come in the spot minutes. And I know some of that's going to have to depend on how much playing time they're getting. They got to get comfortable and not just come in, for 2 minutes and then get subbed out. But I think that's going to be a question throughout the year too, is what guys can provide coming off the bench when they go to that kind of deeper rotation, especially like when Hunter's not on the floor. Who does the offense flow through? It's going to probably flow through Kevin, but if Kevin's struggling, can those guys provide some rhythm? Can El Marco go find a basket with his speed? Can Furphy use his athleticism to get open? Can McDowell provide some solid enough defense to force turnovers to give us extra possessions? I think for me, that's my biggest question so far, is what is that bench going to provide, especially as we get through the rest of non-con schedule, which is where you want to see them play a ton, so that when we're into Big 12 play, they're comfortable. But let's just kind of quickly, as we wrap up here, let's talk about Uconn for a second, because that is the big matchup coming up. Currently undefeated Uconn, 7-0, number 4 in the country, comes into the Fieldhouse Friday night for, I'm trying to think, that's got to be one of the biggest home. It doesn't, and it's weird because it doesn't feel like a big home matchup compared to other seasons, but it's got to be one of the biggest home matchups we've seen in Allen Fieldhouse in quite a while, having 2 top 5 teams in the country playing on a Friday night in Allen Fieldhouse. Usually you only get that in conference play, but now we get to see that in a non-con play. Uconn, of course, the defending national champs, the reigning national champs, and of course their team doesn't look exactly the same as last year. They lost a lot, but they have that big man, Donovan Clingan, 7'2", big guy who's incredibly productive for them, 15 points a game. Surprisingly, only gets 6 rebounds a game at that size. Alex Caravan, their other forward from last year, 14.5 points a game, 5.7 rebounds. Their stud recruit, Stevan Castle, as of now, doesn't look like he's going to play. So that's obviously a big advantage for KU, because right now they've got 5 guys that average 14 or more points a game. So they clearly can score the ball. I haven't really dove into their 7 games real detailed to look at their competition, but very solid team. Have you had a chance to look at this team much so far? We know they're well coached.
Right. We know they're well coached, and we know that they at least have some championship experience. And like you said, they have a lot of offensive firepower. To have 5 guys that are double-digit scorers is very impressive. They don't shoot the ball particularly well on the season. I think they're hovering around like 30%. And then other than Cam Spencer, I don't think a single guy shoots over 40% from 3. So that could be something to play to our advantage. But obviously they have size, they have defense. So it's going to be a very good game. It's going to be interesting to see, Hunter go against Klingon. So to see how he does against that. There's a lot of length there, a lot of height. He averages 2 blocks on the season. So we'll have to see how well he does. Now, on the flip side, Hunter can stretch out. So how quickly can a 7-footer move their feet and chase him off the line? So, I think it's going to be a very interesting matchup. I like a top 5 matchup like that so early in the season, especially after we've already had two in the span of a week and a half. So, Self doing what he always does during non-conference. But I do think it's a winnable game. It's definitely going to be a tougher one. But especially after we've had, a break from the, grinded out games, so to speak. I'm hoping that we can come out of this one with a win.
Yeah, and UConn, 5 of their 7 games have really been against nobody. They did have a very impressive win against Indiana by 20 points. And Indiana's not a bad team, but they're not a really good team. But they held Indiana in check pretty much for most of that game. And then they played Texas, another top 25 team, beat them by 10. That was actually a pretty solid matchup because Texas still did a lot of good things. But Caravan had a huge day. He went 4 for 8 from 3. Spencer had 16 points. Texas actually held Donovan Clingan in check pretty well. He only got 4 shots up and only had 2 rebounds total in the game. That's just ridiculous.
Wow.
If you're a 7'2" guy, you should get more than 2 rebounds. That's unacceptable. Hunter gets 7 in the first 5 minutes in last night's game.
Right.
So I'm excited for this matchup because I do want to see how Hunter plays against another guy of his size. I think we saw a little bit of a struggle with that Marquette game. With their big man, Idrogo, or however you say his name. He was very good, very solid on Hunter, gave him a lot of fits, and Hunter still did well, but he struggled for sure. So I'm interested in that matchup. I'm interested to see how we play Cam Spencer, of course. He's a very electric guard. He's got decent size, pretty solid shooter. I think we'll probably see a lot of DeJuan Harris on him, in my opinion. I think they'll do some rotation, but I think Harris will play a lot on him. Not having Stevan Castle obviously is huge in this matchup for us. I think that definitely plays to our advantage because that's one less guy on the court that can score. But they still have a pretty solid roster. Caravan, like I said, is pretty solid. I think you'll see a lot of KJ and Kevin McCullar on him. But it's good for college basketball to have matchups like this early in the year. You got to have games that are interested to the public. Obviously, as local fans, we're always going to go to games and always be excited if KU's playing, no matter who they're playing. But for college basketball brand as a whole, if you've got 2 powerhouse schools that are top 10 teams in the country playing a game early December when they're still a couple of weeks away from non-con, that's just great for the sport. Gives you a little bit of an insight into what postseason play could look like against other top competition. So I think for me, it's just another game on the schedule to see how well we stack up against the other top teams. You'll have Kentucky, Marquette, Tennessee, now UConn before you get a Big 12 play. That's a pretty hefty non-con schedule there to get some solid data and tape on for how we stack up against high quality teams. So I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be a really good back and forth game. Obviously, I wouldn't pick KU to lose at home against UConn in the Phog, but I do think it's going to be a big time offensive night, or it's going to be a game where the 2 7-footers are just keeping each other, struggling. So we're finding other guys to step up and play. So maybe a game for KJ Adams gets a big game going, or maybe it's another game where DeJuan shows up. Any other thoughts you have on that game?
No, I definitely think it's going to be a closer one. And, I'm hoping that, a lot of attention is going to be on Hunter, and he's going to be probably a big part of their game plan defensively. So like you said, somebody else has got to step up, whether it's DeJuan being aggressive offensively, KJ being an X factor, or McCullar kind of keeping up his hot start offensively here. So I'm really hoping that we see some guys step up. And I would love for one of the younger guys, or one of the newer guys, I should say, with Timberlake included in there, I'd love to see them have an effect on the game.
Yep, I think that would be huge because that would give them some good momentum as we slowly, I know we're about halfway through the non-con schedule. So that'll wrap up for this one. Like we said, we're going to try and do one KU basketball episode a week, give or take, depending on how schedules line up. Our next one will probably be a preview of the KU Mizzou game that comes up about a week after the UConn game. So I'm sure we'll talk about the games in between and recap the UConn game. But that'll probably be the next basketball episode we have, unless there's just some other reason we need to jump on and talk about stuff. I know there's a little bit of talk on Self still trying to add someone to the roster mid-season. And the early things there that we've heard is that there's not a lot of outside opportunities that he's finding around the country. So there's been some talk about, now that football season's wrapping up, could he go tap into somebody on the football team? So maybe we'll talk about something there if anything pops up. But I think that'll kind of wrap it up for this one. So if you guys haven't already, again, hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. That way you're always up to date with all the other content we're doing. Of course, we got the guys with the Aftermath podcast doing all of our Chiefs stuff as we're in the middle of Chiefs football season and getting ready to start the playoff stretch. We'll have a KU football preview of the bowl game once we know that. So bowl game discussion will be this weekend on Sunday for that show to get those bowl games figured out. And then we'll have a preview for that. It's looking like it'll probably be a few weeks until KU plays. So I don't know how soon that episode will come out, but we'll have that for you. And then, of course, if you're a Royals fan, we've got our episode with Cody Tapp from 610 Sports Radio still up. It is still relevant, even though it's about 3 weeks old now, because nothing really has happened in the baseball market big enough to talk about for the Royals. So go check that out if you want to get some more insight on Royals offseason. And, of course, as some more stuff comes down the line, Chris Tenpenny and I will talk some more on that. But I think that'll do it for now. Be sure to check us out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at KCSA Pod. We'd love for you guys to send us any questions or show ideas or things you'd like to hear us discuss in any topic sports related. Feel free to send it our way on any of those. And of course, if you're watching these episodes, you can always leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you to the several of you that joined our live the other day for the Chiefs preview. We're going to try and do a couple more of those here and there, just kind of get some more practice with it. So thank you guys for joining us for that, and hope you can join us for more in the future. That's going to do it for now. Again, he's Spencer Gray. I'm Keegan Russell, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.